Hello, this is JJ Humphrey. I'm with Bobby Cleveland. We're back in Elephant in the Room. This is where we talk about stuff that nobody else wants to talk about. We're always happy to talk about things that are going on in our Oklahoma government that nobody else wants to discuss. And this week, we're going to follow up with the conversation that we had last week. So last week, Bob, we were talking about where we have alleged and turned into the Department of Corrections and to the Attorney General that there are possibly quite a few rapes that seem to be possibly covered up that happened in the Department of Corrections. We talked a little bit last week how that we came about on knowing that information. And so the way that happened was that Bob had gotten a call from an employee of the
department. Well, back up a minute, though.
Yeah.
I heard for the last 2 years, gossip, I guess you could say, rumors that was going on. But when I mentioned to say something about it, everybody said, no, it's not going on.
Well, Bob, like I say, you always hear about this stuff. I've been around the Department of Corrections for 30-something years, and you always hear about it. You know some of it exists. But what you like to think is that when we do know about it, and then when cases are reported, that we properly investigate those cases. And
absolutely. Now that's not what's happening, period.
That's what we're hearing. That's what we're hearing. And that's what, so this employee got a hold to you that she was going to be terminated, and you got
a doctor.
Yes. So it's a psychologist, doctor, and you got involved. It turned out that she was not with OCP, which is what you're over. You're the director over that. But you did go ahead and help her get in contact with an attorney. And then me and you actually called me and I talked to her. And I was going to try to get involved in her termination hearing, and they would not allow me, which I find really shocking because as chairman of corrections, I believe I'm legally able to set in on just about anything they've got. I didn't really push hard against that, but I did meet with you and her attorney, which is going to be Matt Frisbee, and her attorney. In fact, he had come on earlier with us and discussed this case. And anyways, her attorney,
back up a second, JJ. When we met with her and Frisbee was actually not to kind of learn all this. It was to to find out from her what she knew about the rapes.
Well, we met over there, Bob, for her termination. Frisbee's going to help her on her termination.
Right, but we had nothing to do with that.
Deal. But when we got done with all that, she had mentioned all this about rapes. And what we did was, well, how can you verify it? And if you remember, I mean, we waited till they got done with their business, and then we started and said, hey, how you going to verify that the administration knew that you had reported these rapes? And she said, hey, I got an email right here. I said, you got an email? Let's look at it. So we looked at that email, and then, well, what about these other cases? Well, I sent this email to this head psychologist. And so she showed us where she had sent an email saying, here's 5 PREA. And those PREA cases we explained last week are those cases involving sexual battery, sexual type incidents. And she had actually already had 5 of those they called in, sent this head psychologist, an email saying, hey, what are y'all doing with these? And the person sent it back. The head psychologist sent back and said, okay, acknowledging that she got them, but didn't say, hey, we're trying to correct this problem or make this problem right. And boy, I mean, Bob, if you remember, I started getting pretty interested. And then I said, well, how are you going to prove you're a whistleblower? And,
explain a whistleblower.
Sure, absolutely, Bob. I'll explain that. So again, what happens is that the state of Oklahoma, and this is across the United States, they have the same thing, but in our law, we have a law written up to say that if a person who's employed comes forward and gives information, and if you look at the language in that, it's on either a danger to the employees, a danger to the public, a danger to possible inmates. You know, if it's a danger to others, then that's one thing. If it's malfeasance, if it's misusing money. So there's a lot of criteria, and it says that if that employee brings that to a person who can make change, and that could be either a supervisor, it could be a board, it could be a legislator, it could be to the state government, it could be a newspaper person, somebody in the news that could make change and help bring this to light. So if they do that, now it's my understanding, and we've got a lawyer looking at this, that it's my understanding that if they prove that they brought this to light and somebody ignored it and didn't do it and they fired her, that person can actually be terminated, I think, under that act. And so that person can go back, and if they can prove that they were a whistleblower and they were wrongfully terminated, I think they have legal action. And we've got a lawyer looking into that right now, because I think this case definitely, she, when we asked her, if you'll remember, Bob, I asked her, I said, well, how are you going to prove you're a whistleblower? And most of the time, what you look at on those cases, because I've been involved in several of them cases, you look at who did they tell and how that, under this one, there is actually a procedure for the state employees to contact the state of Oklahoma, an office called OMES, the head office over all Oklahoma, and file that. She actually filed one with Oklahoma and filed one with the federal government. And she actually has the documents showing she filed it. And what I did, I followed up and got hold of OMES and said, I want to know what was done with this, because I had the actual employee number and the whole 9 yards. And they looked at it. They sent me an email. OMES said, hey, we can't talk to you about what we did for this individual. But what we can tell you is that we looked at this case, that we sent it to the Attorney General, which was under John O'Connor, and we sent it to John O'Connor's office, the Attorney General, and said it does warrant investigation. Now, Bob, that was back either in August or September. Mm-hmm. And now this person, after submitting all this, starts getting what we call OIG, which is internal affairs for people who don't understand it, starts getting these internal affairs investigations conducted on her after all of this.
After she did the whistleblower?
Yeah, I think one was before, started, and then she got hold of
the one before was proven it was found that there was no substance to it, right?
It's unsubstantiated. There was nothing found on it that was substantiated. In that one, Bob, she came back and she reported, hey, what about all this stuff? She reported the warden coming in drunk. She reported holding people past their discharge. She reported inmates having sexual abuse on them. And she actually reported her own case where an officer had sexually assaulted her. Right. And nothing is being done on these things. And
now,
so
the way I understand nothing's being done is they went to the people who did the PREA, turned them in, and they were never contacted. And they turned the PREA into DOC, and they were never contacted and never interviewed. And she was not interviewed when she turned hers in, and she could not find anybody they interviewed. Is that correct?
Well, and that's what she's reporting, because she's the person they generally come and talk to. As a psychologist, she's the person. So she's in the know on all this, and she's saying, hey, this person's never been contacted. This person's not been contacted. So she's saying these things as not being
okay, well, jump ahead as to why she was terminated according to the lawsuit.
Well, here's the thing. They saying that she was not doing her job, that, that she would go in and not check out keys and not go to her workstation, but her workstation's all over the prison. She may go talk to people all over. So, they had that. They said that she didn't report. So one time the investigator, for not reporting that an inmate had disclosed to her that inmate was going to harm somebody. So they come and investigate her for that's my understanding. And I'm pretty certain I understand it. So they come and investigate for that. And then shortly after that, they investigate her for not disclosing that an inmate had not shared. She shared a dream with her saying that in her dream, she's harming this person. So now she just got investigated for sharing that this person threatened somebody, verbally threatened somebody. Now she's got a person saying, I'm having dreams about hurting this person, and she doesn't share it. And that's the reason they fired her. That was the kind of linchpin that got her fired. But here's the big kicker, and this is what, Bob, this is kind of the big thing that's happened since we last had this video, is that she went to court on this. Now, remember,
explain where she goes to court at.
Yeah, that's really key, because here's what's happened. So our listeners know there used to be a process called merit protection. And under that, you couldn't just fire an employee. They had rights to show where, hey, if I'm wrongfully fired, or if, you got a bad supervisor or whatever, they could appeal that process, and they could come before court and say, hey, this wasn't right. Well,
state court. I mean,
it's a state
OMES court.
Yeah. So, and you can actually get to district court there, but you have to go through this before, and you could plead your case. And it was a pretty fair process. I think that it was still tilted in their favor, but it was a more fair process. And so two years ago or so, the state come up with, and this was something that our governor pushed, and it was something that our director of the Department of Correction, who was at OMES at the time, pushed. And so they made a new process, and it's called the Civil Service Management Act.
Division.
Yeah, Civil Service Management Act, I believe is what they call that, Bob. But anyways, to make a kind of long story, basically it stacked the cards in all their favor.
Right.
It is very hard to go in and prove.
Well, you're not supposed to be able to do that.
Well, you can't bring your own witnesses. You can't have your records. You can't do anything to hardly defend yourself. And they get to bring in 3 people, and basically they have whatever records they want. So, I mean, the cards are stacked in their favor. But here's what happened. This girl was able to come in with her attorney that we introduced him to, Matt Frisbee, and the judge found that she was wrongfully fired, that they had no reason. And the reason they found that was because you could look at what they had started. It was so just unreal, the stuff that they tried to say. And it was obvious that they went in after they got mad at her and started creating all of this stuff.
Well, there was 4 issues that they came in on, and all 4 issues went in the favor of the doctor. I mean, you think they could have won maybe 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 4 or something like that?
Bob,
all 4 straight out.
Our listeners are not going to realize how huge that is. Me and you realize, because we're involved in it all the time, and we know for that doctor to win that like that means that they wrongfully, big time, woefully had no grounds to fire on.
Now she appeared before a regular judge, a judge, a lawyer,
right.
Judge, and just like going to the court, we went to court to state.
Right.
That's someone that's qualified to be there. They'll probably fire that guy now because he ruled against him.
And Bob, they had to hire her back. And then once they hired her back.
Wait a minute. I think they were hiring her back with back pay.
Yeah, I mean, it was all reinstated her with back pay, everything.
Okay.
I mean, she won huge. I mean, she won it big. And then once she won, about a week later, 5 days later, just a little.
No, we got it on. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Frisbee said, "Hey, I got the letter." That was Monday, and then on Friday we get the other letter.
Yeah, 5 days later, we get a letter saying, or she gets a letter saying, "Oh, you're in this top 5%." So apparently, there's 5% that you can fire. You can fire without cause. You can just fire them just because you want to fire them. And so they come back and said, "Oh, now we're in the top 5%. Now here's the problem, Bob. How in the world did you not know she was in that 5% when you tried to fire her back in December? This thing has went from December to present time. I mean, end of March, and you ain't been aware that she's in that top 5%. How in the world does that happen? That looks pretty hinky. I mean, that looks.
Now, are you supposed to have as an employee? I don't know how it works. And are you supposed to know that you're in that 5%?
Well, I would think before you take a job, they ought to notify you that you're going to take a job that they can just fire you without cause. I would think they'd notify you of that. Apparently they haven't. She didn't know it. And apparently they didn't know it either. That's what's funny. She didn't know it and they didn't know it. And so we go through this entire lengthy process and everything. And now she gets reinstated with back pay. And then 5 days later, they come back and go, no, we found out that you're in this 5% and we're just going to go ahead and fire you anyways. Now, what looks so bad about that, Bob, is the court just told them you don't have a reason to fire. Now, I can't understand if the court just told you that you do not have a reason, and now just because you can, you're going to fire, instead of going back and looking. See, if I was the boss on this, Bob, I'd be looking at the people who were trying to fire. This would tell me, hey, we got a problem in our management. We got a problem. That's what we keep saying, Bob. You got a bunch of people in management that is a problem.
We've been saying that for a long time.
Well, and especially one of this doctor's supervisors. Hey, I thought they fired her. We talked about that last time. She's terrible. And the fact that she's involved in this, she was the person who did the termination. And now we find out that she was wrongfully terminated. You don't think I'd be looking at that person and saying, hey, what is the issues and why did you do this? And again, instead of looking at that, what are we going to do? We find out we can fire, we just going to can her. When we know that we have no reason, when we know that what she's been saying has now been proven true. And now here's what the other thing is. Now we know that what she said was that she was wrongfully targeted. She was wrongfully fired. They made up a bunch of stuff. And now we know that to be true. She won all 4 issues. So guess what? Would the fact that she was a whistleblower and the fact that she turned all this stuff in, does that have any impact on why they wanted to fire? Well, guess what? It starts to look like when you had to make up all this reason to fire and the court agrees with her. And hey, this ain't, look, I didn't look at what the court looked at. I ain't looked into the termination that in depth, but I have looked at what accusations she's making on the rates in pretty in depth. And again, when I come in and I say, hey, you go verify this. Okay, this is how I verify it. I've got an email. I've got this. I've got that. Then I went out and found an inmate that knew about a lot of these cases, and she wrote me statements. And then I went out and found, well, you actually brought in another inmate who knew about 5 of those cases. And again, Bob, we didn't say, oh, let me tell you what happened here. Now you tell me if you knew that. What we said was, here's the officer, here's the inmate. What do you know about that situation? And if you don't have firsthand, I ain't caring about, I heard, I want to know, what do you know? And again, confirm 5 of those. And I mean, just identical to what the other inmate said. So again, what we're looking at, this is huge. I think the fact that the judge ruled in her favor and the fact that DOC has now come back and fired her once again when they had a judge's order saying that she was wrongfully fired. And when you got accusations at this level saying that she reported these rapes, and now we 100% have proof that she was wrongfully fired. So again, some of the things you're going to have to prove in a whistleblower. One, did you notify somebody who could make change? Well, guess what? She did. She notified the state of Oklahoma in a written process that is well documented. And the state of Oklahoma found that it was warranted to investigate. And then the attorney general failed to investigate. Now, that's one thing we know 100 absolutely for sure.
Yeah.
Now, we also know, because on whistleblowers, part of it is that you have to prove that they targeted you because of the information you were given. Well, guess what? She was targeted and she was terminated. And then the court has already ruled that she was wrongfully terminated, meaning all this they claim was woeful, it was wrong, and she won every accusation, all 4 accusations she won it. Now, again, That's pretty, Bob, being you know what it takes to get that done. That's huge. That's strong. So we know she turned in the information. We know she was wrongfully terminated. We know the court ruled all 4 accusations in her favor. And then we know that after 3 months of going through all of this termination, that the Department of Corrections just jumps up and says, oh, by the way, she's in 5% with us, fire her anyways, even though we know she was wrongfully fired. With
so
all of these accusations.
They put her through going to court, and I'm sure you're a nervous wreck when you're going through all this. You have to go to court, and they put her through all this all the time, knowing that she was a 5%er. I don't know why they would even do that, or they claimed that she was a 5%er later on. But you think the right thing to do would say, "Hey, we've screwed up." If this is really accurate, they really had all this at the time. They knew she was a 5%, but they let it go forward. They ought to, I mean, the right thing to do to any human being is to say, "Hey, go back to work. You know, we're going to drop this. There's a mistake made. It's our fault."
Well, Bob, here's the deal. It doesn't matter whether you're 5% or you know, I'm going to tell you something. I wouldn't have a 5%. I'd have either you need to be fired or you don't need to be fired. That's the way you treat people.
Well, that's the way it should be. But
yeah, I mean, here's the deal. You treat people right. You treat people fairly. When the court has already determined that you did not treat her fairly, that all of this was a ruse and that all of it was false and that you made up all of it, or that it wasn't worthy of firing, then guess what? Then that ought to make you sit back, whether she's in the 5 or not. You don't fire somebody when the court just told you that everything that was done was wrong. Now, what you do is you start looking at the people who told you that all of this was legit. And how many times have we seen that, Bob? How many times have we seen the upper administration tell us, oh, no, y'all don't know what you're talking about. Y'all's wrong. This ain't, y'all don't have the information. Y'all don't have all the answers. And we sit back and go, okay, well, maybe y'all's right. Maybe we don't. But here's what we know. And guess what? How many times have we been proven right?
Well, we've been proven right almost 100% of the time.
Majority, lots of times. Here's another case where we were told right off the bat, we didn't know what we were talking about. They got a strong case against her. She's a terrible employee. She's got lots of problems. And bam, you go to court, and guess what? Even with the cards stacked 100% in their favor, I guess not 100%, maybe 99%, we do pull. And here's the deal. Here lately, we pulled several out, Bob. Even with the odds completely against us, we're pulling them out because they're so wrong. I mean, they're just so wrong and doing stuff that's just blatant. And so that's what the court found, was this was a blatant, wrongful firing, and told them to reinstate her with back pay. Now that's huge. And so again, why would the Department of Corrections choose to fire her even when they find out that they can? Wrong move, bad move. Looks terrible, Bob. That looks terrible. But then when you put it into view, when you take into account that she filed whistleblowers, really terrible move. And then here's the deal, Bob. Does it add credibility? I mean, do you feel like her case has gotten more credible as we go?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, when we listen to it. But, be clear so that everybody understands. Oklahoma Corrections professionals did not represent her.
No, she wasn't a member. Bob, the deal was she wasn't a member.
She had to pay for it. She had to get her own lawyer. She had to do it. So
she had to pay for it. But here's what happened. When you found out, you called me and we talked to her. We didn't just jump on board all of a sudden and go, oh, yeah, you got all this information. We weren't like that. We talked to her. We met, she sounded like she had a pretty decent case. And we met with her in the lawyer's office. Bob, it is not, how many times have I went to your attorney's office with you? I mean, a couple of times I've been over there, but we get hundreds. You get hundreds of calls. I get a lot of calls. It's rare for being you to go and get set in on a employee's legal counsel. And like I say, if we've done that before, it's not been maybe once before.
We haven't ever done that.
We've never done it. I couldn't remember, Bob, but I know it's a really rare occasion. And
but JJ, back up a little bit. Let's go back to at OSP 3 years ago. We had an officer up there that was sexually assaulted.
Mm-hmm.
For a whole week, nothing was done to that officer. And what happened?
Well, and Bob, I think we talked about that last time too. In that case, we had a person that her lieutenant, she is a employee underneath him, so an officer underneath that lieutenant was sexually assaulted. What he did was, and I know it sounds crude, but some of this stuff, that's just the way you got to be. He dry hunched her. He got on top of her, hunched on top of her, felt all over her, was trying to kiss her, kissed her, holding her down in a chair, which is sexual battery. She reports it to the group that she's supposed to report it to.
She reported it to the warden.
Yeah, she reported to warden, but then he referred her to another group, EOC or something like that. The employee group that there's
handles Prius.
Yes, it handles Prius. So, anyways, she reports it. They turn it around on her and said, "Well, she showed her breast to him." Well, here's the deal. Even if she had done that, which she denied emphatically that she did that, but even if she had, that don't warrant him doing that. And that's what I told him. I said, Lord, well, if they're both doing that, then fire both of them, but you don't let them get away with the stuff. And they were going to do nothing. And again, we had it out with leadership. I mean, went round and round with them, got off phone, called you, called her and said, hey.
We didn't always talk about it. It didn't happen. You guys don't have all the information.
And so we just told her, go down there to the police department because it's a sexual battery that happened in the city limits. Go down there in the police department, report it, and they'll go out there and investigate it. They went out there the next day. Hey, phones began to pop, and, oh, yeah, hey, we got this under control. I told her when it happened that what they'll do is call and say, hey, we're going to investigate this. You go down there and drop that, and we'll handle it in-house. I told her, I said, nope, once you filed it, that's the DA's decision. Just tell him, talk to the DA. The guy ended up with what, Bob, 6, 7 more charges, I think. So
he had arrest warrants out already.
But here's the Bob, the deal is, while we tell that story multiple times, it's not just to wear the story out. It's to show you that when leadership at DOC called, and they call down to lower levels, oh, no, that's a lie. That's a lie. And sometimes it may be, hey, we've got involved in cases that we've had to say, okay, they're not telling the truth or they're guilty, you know. Mm-hmm. I mean, sometimes we just have to say, can't help you. You did the deed, you know. So we do that. When we find that, we do that, you know. But at the end of the day, they called down there, oh, never happened, blaming it on her. Well, guess what? They got turned around and twisted back around and the truth come out. And again, that's what's happening so many times is you got poor supervisors. And Bob, we don't want to make out every supervisor in DOC is a poor supervisor.
No, not at all.
That's not what we're saying.
They're not.
We don't want people to take it. They've got great people. Man, DOC is full of great people. But they have some piss poor, sorry people also. And again, a lot of your piss poor, sorry people have been promoted and promoted and promoted. Not all people who are in the top are bad. I can name you. I've got really good friends in the top. And I think when they find out something's wrong, man, they go after it and they do what they think's right. And I think that when they find, you know, like on this, they may believe what they're doing is right because that's what they've been told. But what I'm saying is, you ought to look at who's telling you. Now, first of all, one of the main supervisors down there is a puke. She ain't worth nothing. She ought to have been fired a long time ago. And now we have it on the judge's order that she's a puke again and lied again. And instead of going back and looking at her, y'all gonna fire the person that the court's already found that she lied on, that the supervisor lied on. And you're not going to look at the supervisor and fire the supervisor. You're going to fire the employee that the court's already said stood up and did the right thing.
But you know what, JJ? This is another case. Again, have they reacted on it a year ago and done something about it a year ago, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in right now.
Yeah, Bob, here's the deal. When the girl's got, when the doctor has got, hardcore evidence, and she's been pretty smart on what she saved and didn't save. But when you go in there and say, well, now, how are you going to prove that this deputy warden knew that this case going on? Got this email. And again, the email says, hey, here's this sexual case. What have y'all done? And she gets an email back and said, well, we put an investigator on it, but he quit after 2 days and we hadn't followed up with it. Well, damn. You got a rape going on and you ain't followed up with it. And here you're going to respond that answer. I mean, my answer to be, thank you for your acknowledgement of this case. And I apologize. And you just saved us and we're getting on it right now. That if I hadn't done anything on a rape case, that's what I've been saying is, thank you for bringing this to my attention. We're all over it right now. But instead, we had a person. Now, that's my understanding. I read the email, my understanding, and I'm getting one side email. But here's the deal. The email goes to her, and she responds. I've seen that chain.
Well, that's just not her saying that. I haven't seen these, but I'm just taking your word for it. But that's not saying that you're just taking her word for it. She's proven that she has that.
No, I'm not going to I wouldn't go forward. Even if I believed her, Bob, even if I believed her, I would not go forward without I had proof of what she said. Now, am I saying I'm 100% correct? Am I saying she's 100% correct? No, but what I am saying is that she turned in a whistleblowers to the state of Oklahoma. They found it warranted to investigate, and the AG refused or failed to investigate. Now, that's what I know. I know that afterwards she starts being targeted to be terminated, which again, classic whistleblowers. And she was terminated, and that in a stacked deck court, weighted 100% to the other side, that she was able to win, and the court found that she was wrongfully and that the accusations against her were all false and found it for her favor, ordered them to reinstate, and 5 days later, they find another reason to fire her, which again, if you don't know that for 3 months, how do you go 3 months looking at an employee's case? You're looking at terminating an employee. You're looking at going to court. You're going to court. You're getting your case ready, and you don't know that she's in that 5%. Boy, if that don't look like a daggum, even if it's so, I wouldn't tell it. I wouldn't have fired her. Damn, that makes them look bad.
It sure does. It makes them look like they're it
looks bad, Bob. It looks bad.
It's just like the deal up there where this inmate tried to poison and kill an officer. That's another one. They tried to cover that up too. And
Bob, and on that, I will speak up for the leadership on that. Again, when I called
Justin Ferris,
yeah,
that 5 days later, when I found out at 10:30 at night on a Sunday night, he immediately reacted and did something. He got that guy out of there, but they had not moved her, and they were trying to cover it up inside of the prison.
Yeah.
So that,
Bob, we had a guy not too long ago. I was ready, set to go out and testify out there at Sayre, and they had him working. And again, this is something yesterday I got caught. We were at a meeting, and I had people sitting there telling me, hey, we're having a run twice as many. So there's supposed to be 4 on this run. There's 2 of us on this run. And if something happens, they're going to hold us accountable for what 4 people ought to be doing. I said, it's been going on for quite some time. It's been going on for years and years, but it's worse right now due to the shortages. But we had a guy there.
Jay, speaking of that, JJ, I'm finding out it's really a lot worse than we thought it was.
Well, Bob, it is. And here's what people don't understand. If you're not a student of corrections, and hey, most people ain't going to study corrections, and I guess I'm a weird individual. I have studied corrections a lot.
You are kind of weird.
I'm an odd cat. I'm out of the box. In fact, I take the box and tear it up. But here's the deal: if you went and studied back in the '70s when we had the big riots at McAllister, and I mean it was bad. They had riots at Stringtown, and it was bad. And if you went and looked and you studied, there's a major lawsuit in Oklahoma when you're talking to corrections, and if you're involved in corrections, most people know it. And it's called Battles versus Anderson, Battles versus State. Inmate sued. A guy named Bolick, I think, was the attorney that represented Battles, and they ended up getting a federal ruling, and DOC went under federal control. Now, back in that time period, $10,000 a day fine was huge, and the feds fined Oklahoma, if I'm not mistaken, $10,000 a day till they got some things right. And if you go back and study all that, and what they'll tell you is when you get down to these numbers that we're talking about, when you've got a 50% shortage or even a 45 or so percent shortage, what begins to happen, it's not just the fact that we got employees who are tired and having wrecks coming to work. It's not just the fact that employees get wore out and got bad tempers or things are just not as good. And that's why they talk about me and you being negative. Not being negative, we're reporting what the facts are. But when you have that, it's hard to get employees to come to work because your employees are the ones telling everybody this ain't a good place to work. And again, when you get that shortage, it's hard to turn it around,
I didn't think our morale in our prison system could get any worse, but I have to really say that it's probably, this is down to the rock bottom now.
Well, and again, people are saying, hey, they can fire us for no reason, without cause, and we can't defend ourselves. That's the big thing. All these wardens going, and I say some of them need to go, but some of them maybe not. But because of the way they're going, you got the lower staff going, man, if they fire them, the rest of us on chopping blocks, so that's a big worry. But here's a bigger problem, Bob. When you look at these battle versus state issues and things, what you find out is when you lose the number of correctional officers, guess what starts happening? Your drugs start to flow in more readily. Boy, you get all kinds of drug issues. You have gang problems. You have problems on the yard with illegal gambling, or they sell food on the yard. They have all kinds of markets and dope and all kinds of things. There's all kinds of hustles going on in the yard to make money, to sell dope, to have sexual favors done, whatever. And again, what you start seeing is inmate violence increases, and the sexual violence against the inmates increases. And so again, that's the things that you see. And now we have a report of this going on. And again, the person who brings it to light ends up being terminated. And again, she filed the whistleblowers. And again, Bob, we're not saying it's so, but what we're saying is that we know for fact she filed whistleblowers. We know that 100%. We know it was investigated. And we know that it was turned over to the AG with a report saying that it would warrant investigation. And we know that it was not. We know that supervisors by emails, we know that supervisors were contacted, made aware of these things, and we can talk to some of the people involved who say, I was never contacted. So if you don't contact a person, it's not a big jump or leap of faith to say they probably didn't investigate it. Bob, when you look at that, all these people who were accused of these acts no longer work there and were allowed to resign. If it's 13, if that be true, now I haven't followed up to verify, but I have followed up to say, here's a list of people, and I am advised that they were allowed to resign and no longer work for you. So it's not hard to investigate. See, is that even true? That's pretty easy. You know, that's a very simple thing to look at and verify. And if that be true, guess what? That's a pretty good clue in and by itself. You got 13 or 14 people that accusations are being made on this level, and they're all resigned. Now that would make
Representative Humphrey, should OIG, the internal investigation arm of DOC, should they be investigating themselves?
Hell no. Here's the deal, Bob. You know, if it's one individual accused, so if you got Sergeant John's accused, you know, Sergeant Bill accused, or whoever, you know, okay, OIG investigates that because that's what they're there for. They're there to investigate the internal affairs issues. But when you have it reported that the internal affair issues, the OIG themselves are not doing their job and are corrupt, then absolutely not. You don't allow them to investigate it. And when you have it being said that the Department of Corrections knew this and covered it up, and again, how high does that go up there? I can tell you our current director was not involved in this because he wasn't even working when, but I will tell you this, and I don't know if the director's listening to this elephant in the room or not, but if the director was, and I've pretty much been pretty direct with the director, I don't think he'd be big surprised by anything I say. But what I would advise the director is, you know, you weren't involved in this, but the fact that you got an employee under your watch who was accused of falsely and fired falsely, and now you know reported all this, again, I think it's something I would be involved in, and I think I'd at least hold on to that employee until the whole thing come out, and whether what she reported is true or not true, or whether she actually had a factual foundation to believe she was reporting the truth. And so again, I think based on what I've seen, she's got more than enough that I believe here's the deal, Bob. I put my personal name out, you know, publicly. I mean, 100% publicly, that I believe it warrants investigation. That I've found enough that I think that we ought to do an investigation. And I've met with the AG to tell him so. And so far, they've not contacted me back.
Well, I tell you, it really turned into be my opinion, a big deal. I don't think DOC thinks it's a big deal, but it's a big deal.
Well, I think DOC has listened to some of their supervisors that they have a little confidence in that I have no confidence in. And I think what they've done is to say, oh, well, you know, she was a poor employee because our supervisors down there say that she's a poor employee. And I think they're buying into that. And what they should be buying into is what that court said. And now, guess what? We ought to take a second and reanalyze this thing, because a court analyzed it pretty close and said they were wrong. And then again, I've given them a report that I think anybody looking at that report, any reasonable person looks at that report, should have pause to say, you know what, there's grounds to warrant an investigation. And if there's grounds to warrant an investigation, then it looks like that then anybody ought to be able to understand that employee was making a accurate report, you know, that she had reasons to believe. Now, if you go and investigate it and it's not true, doesn't mean that employee's a bad employee. It means that she didn't know the whole facts, or we didn't know the backstory, or we didn't have all of it. It's possible. I'm going to tell you, with the numbers of what we've seen, with the inmates telling the exact same stories of people going in, trading tobacco and contraband for sex. I didn't do an investigation. I went and talked to inmates. I wouldn't call what I did an investigation. I'd call it an inquiry. And like I say, based on my inquiry, I guarantee you that if they'd let me investigate this thing, I'd be shocked if we didn't find horrific problems.
Well, it's really interesting. It's the new system that took place of merit protection is totally wrong for what they've done. But I know it's what the governor wanted. And
well, I think here's the deal. Again, this is where we're at. We got a bunch of people who don't even know what the system is, trying to correct the system. And again, I love these guys. I love the governor. I know the governor knows I love him. You ain't found anybody else go out and make videos against Joyless Hofschister.
right.
He knows I love him. I defend the governor all the time. When I disagree with him, I stand up and disagree with him. But Lord, would you want somebody to agree with J.J. Humphrey all the time? That'd be sad, you know. So here's the deal. I can't say how much I love him, but, you know, I don't have anything against Director Harp. I think he's a good guy. I think he's trying to do what he thinks is right. But they got this attitude that all your state employees are just people who are worthless if they, and I don't want to say that they don't look at all state employees worthless, but what they feel like is that the people who are accused of doing wrong are worthless, and we need to just be able to walk in and get rid of them. And what they do not know is the people who probably are more worthless are some of those in the upper chains.
The supervisors.
They're supervisors. And again, here's the deal. It was never a problem to fire people. That's the other thing is they don't understand this. They don't understand evidence-based practice, the thing that everybody hangs their hat on. They ain't got a clue what that means, because here's the deal. If you do your employee right, if you go in there and tell your employee, change this behavior, now you write and say you didn't change. I gave you 2 verbals and you didn't change it. Now I'm giving you written instruction. Now I'm giving you a day off. Now I'm giving you a week off. Hey, guess what? In 6 months, you can fire that person. And had they done that with this doctor and had legitimate reasons, legitimate documentation, legitimate, corrections, trying to change that behavior, guess what? You go to any court, and I don't care, even if the deck's stacked the other way in favor for the employee, you can win every time when you do what's right. If you do what's right.
I think a 6 months time frame is a little long. You could do it a whole lot quicker than that.
Oh, you just follow. But here's the deal. I would give it 6 months and try to just, change that behavior. Unless they just did something horrendous. And if they did something horrendous, then it speeds up. But, Bob, if I'm just if you're coming in and I don't like the fact that you don't go get your keys immediately, you know how I change that? Hey, Bob, when you come in, would you get your keys immediately? And I think, now, Bob, if I'm not mistaken, I think when they told her that, guess what? She changed her behavior, started going getting her keys.
Well, too, that was, I think COVID had something to do with that too, way it all came down. But
it might. But here's the deal, Bob. What they showed, if I'm not mistaken, in this hearing, was that when they told her what the problem was, she fixed the problem, and that's what you call a good employee. If I don't know there's a problem, guess what? But if you tell me, hey, we don't like this, which again is a bunch of crap. The fact that she gets her keys, don't get her keys, whatever. Wow. You want to talk about nickel and diming somebody, but here's what's funny. Even nickel and diming her, when you told her what the problem was, she corrected the problem. Now, when you do that, guess what? That's when it becomes hard to fire somebody, when they're doing exactly what you ask them to do. Now, and that's what we found in this case. And again, if the department or any other agency would use fair practices, evidence-based practice, they would never have to worry about firing a person. They'd win 100% of the time because they'd be correct. And what we find is seldom, what we find is they get mad at somebody, they get it out for somebody, and they do not do their job and have not done their job, and then they just make up a bunch of bullshit on the person and try to fire them. And that's what happened here, it looks like. Now, again, I wasn't sitting in that courtroom, but when a judge finds all 4 things in your favor in this court, it's pretty certain that it was a pretty poor case, And again, Bob, what we've got to go back to, what does this do to her accountability on her reporting all of these rapes? Does it make her more credible?
It does.
It does in my book. It does in my book, because again, when she says, hey, I believe I was targeted for this reason. And now we find out they didn't have anything. She sure wasn't fired for cause. She was fired because they were mad at her. Well, what did they get mad at her for? Well, it appears like that it seems a whole lot more likely what they got mad about is the fact that she outed on all of this stuff. And again, it's a sad day that when you have an employee come and try to make, this ought to be stuff that you give an employee of the year for instead of terminating her. And now it seems way, way more credible. And what are we going to do? We're going to find some BS reason. Oh, well, we found this 5% that nobody ever knew about. 3 months of trying to fire her, 3 months of looking at her entire record, 3 months of studying all this, getting ready for court and study. They studied her stuff. They had to go back and look at her evaluations and what class she was in. I mean, you'd have to go back and look at all that. And you weren't aware that she's in 5%. And the only person in the whole Department of Corrections is where's general counsel? Well, how does that work? How in the world does that work? And that just, it does not look good. And then you put in the fact that she's reported this stuff. And Bob, again, for our listeners, they need to be aware. And I know we said this last week, but when you are in a position over other people, when you have power over other people, then if you have sex with them, so if you are an employee of the Department of Corrections and you are over inmates, if you have any sex, even if it's consensual, even if they were begging you to have sex with them, it's called rape, and it still is rape. And what the allegations are is that the department knew that these sexual encounters were going on, and instead of charging the individual, instead of giving that to the district attorney to make a decision, or maybe to the internal affairs or to PREA like they should, instead that these things were swept under the rug and that they went to those employees and said, we're going to give you an opportunity to resign, or that there was at least the employee did resign and they were allowed to resign when there should have been knowledge that these sexual encounters were going on. Now, again, if the leadership people, and again, I don't know how high this goes. I don't think it would go all the way to the top. But again, does it go into OIG? Possibly. Were they notified? I know they were notified, and it doesn't appear like they did anything. So it goes to there. Now if an employee, like if say somebody at a Justin Ferris's level okayed an investigation and they come back and say there's nothing there, then Justin Ferris can't be held accountable for that. He's got people under him investigating it, and he's just following what they say. So that's so when I say you don't know how high this responsibility falls, I doubt it goes to that level, but I think it'll go to possibly OIG, at least to their agents level.
It'll be a regional director at least.
Well, it could be regional director, but again, Bob, I don't put it on them if the investigator comes back. And again, though, the question is, what did the investigator do? And that's where sometime does the regional director have an obligation to say, let me look at your investigation. Who all did you talk to? And again, if we look at an investigation and he went and talked to the officer, did you do this? No. Or if he did, did he follow up, or did the investigator follow up on the actual investigations? Were there actual, did people come in and get questioned? Now here's the thing. So let's give Dr. Lewis. So she comes in, she gets investigated for a bunch of stuff that was found unsubstantiated. And again, stuff like, you didn't go get your keys. When you come into work, you didn't immediately go get your keys. Now, again, the fact that you had to have an internal affairs investigation for that, and she was accused of some sexual allegations herself, all found unsubstantiated. while that investigation is going on, and I'm advised that investigation was taped, she reports, she says, well, I want to know why y'all aren't investigating the warden coming in drunk. I want to know why you're not investigating people's cases being, people being kept way past their discharge date. I want to know why you're not investigating these allegations of sexual assault against inmates. And I want to know why you didn't investigate the sexual assault against me. So 6 days later, they sent another OIG, which is again internal affairs, sent him down to investigate that. That guy's name's Hunt. Sent him down to investigate it. Now, I can tell you, in talking to Dr. Lewis, she is unaware of anybody else that got questioned, talked to. And again, maybe he did it without her knowledge. But Bob, you know, and I know, in a prison, it's hard to keep secrets. And so
if you don't have any secrets, everybody knows everything.
It's hard to keep secrets. So if they're pulling inmates in to talk to them, man, that's going all out through the prison. If they're pulling other, security people in, it's going all out through the prison. And again, she's saying they didn't hear of that. So it makes it seem like very little was done. The guy did not take the conversation, and she ended up emailing him back all of the accusations in this. And that's how we know that OIG did indeed get told about this issues. And again, I want to see, what did you do? Because according to the people I talked to that were in the prison at the time, nothing was done. And again, something of that big nature everybody would have known.
Well, Representative, we need to shut her down. But I want to ask you a question here, because I've been at the Capitol, of course, every day since we've been having the session's been on. And I hear a lot of stuff about DHS. Have you looked into anything on DHS? Is that something we can talk about maybe next week or so? Is there anything?
I'd be happy to talk about what I'm doing with DHS, and I think that it would warrant a whole, maybe even like what we're doing here, 2 weeks. If we just started getting into one case at a time or multiple cases. But Pottawatomie County, big time nightmare. They've got nightmares over there. They've had a grand jury. I don't know exactly what's all come out of that, but I can tell you, not enough. I'm hearing another county's got more problems than they do. I've got stuff from Cleveland County. I've got stuff from.
Let's get it going next week. But in the meantime, why don't you just take us home? And I thank you very much for what you do for the state of Oklahoma. And I appreciate that you took a hold of this and got this investigation going. And
Bob, and before we shut it down, also, I do want to say one of the things that we've reported on here is the Turnpike. I went out several, in fact, maybe a month ago, somewhere around January 6th, 7th, when we had that hearing, come back and ask for an audit. Didn't hear a whole lot about going on, but now we do know that the Attorney General has come out and asked for an audit, not only on OTA, which is the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority, but also on ODOT, which is the Oklahoma Department of Transportation, in that, our money's being transferred between those two agencies that shouldn't be transferred, and just take a look at what's going on with some of these allegations of not meeting properly and allegations of how these money is going to the engineering firms. And so again, it is huge. I'm excited that we did get an audit done in that. I'm actually talking to some people today about, hey, we ought to get together and put together a book that outlines the issues so that we can give that to the Attorney General and to the auditor. Yeah, or to media, and say, hey, here's the issues that we've been able to uncover, and that we document those issues. So it's not just us saying so. And that's what we're doing with DHS. That's what we're doing with DOC. That's what we're doing with the Turnpike. We're doing it with Richard Glossop's case. We're doing it with Fleener's case, David Fleener's. So we're doing it with multiple things. There's a lot of problems out here that need to be corrected, and we're trying to bring them to light. So at the end of the day, as we close out, we just want to tell our people, hey, we're working. Bob's working all the time. I'm working. The reason we started this program is so that we can tell people there are people in the government who are trying to do what's right, who are trying to bring things to light that are wrong, and trying to call out. And again, we're not We're not hating on any group. We're not. What we're wanting to do, we're wanting to make Oklahoma a place we can be proud of. We're tired of looking at the federal government and how much corruption and how the DOJ's corrupt, FBI's corrupt, CIA corrupt. Guess what? We can't do it there, but what we can do is make a difference, and you can make a difference in your own state and in your own backyard. I ask you to join us, get involved. We're going to start talking about ways to get involved with your government, how we take over the money issues, that we had to start a grassroots, common people, grassroots movement to take back government. We are the government. The people are the government. We got to take it back, and that's what this program's about. You want to add anything, Bob?
No, sir. I think you did a good job. Thank you very much.
You bet. Thank you. Hey, y'all have a blessed day.
God bless you.